Good afternoon, my friends. This is the Grimflayer. Hope you're all doing very well today. We're back in the pilot's chair. We are playing some more Golgari Midrange, everybody's favorite modern deck, for you here today. Real quick before we begin, let us thank our patron, Chris, who was formerly an Inquisitor and has upgraded his level of support. He is now a Confidant. Thank you so much, Chris. Very generous of you, my friend. Welcome to the fold. Thank you for your support, and thanks as always to all of my patrons. You guys know I love you. You know I couldn't do it without you. Thank you so much. Speaking of the patrons, by the time this video is live, I should have written up a post on Patreon for the people in the Confidant tier and above to vote. You can vote there, or you can get at me here on the channel, wherever else you can find me. Let me know what you want me to write next month's scouting report about. There have been some ideas bandied about, but I'll leave that up to you as always. You guys get to decide. So make sure if you're in the Confidant tier or above, you make your voice heard and let me know what you want me to write about for next month. Without further ado, let's play some Magic. So our opponent has kept 7, and we are going to keep 7 as well. We have a very balanced hand. We've got a lot going on. Turn 1 hand disruption would fit very, very well in this hand, perhaps in place of an Assassin's Trophy, but you know what, for a blind game 1, this hand's just fine with me. So the opponent's going to go ahead and shock in an Overgrown Tomb, and they're going to Inquisition us. So this would be our friend Day by Day. What's up, Day by Day? If you're watching this, it was a pleasure seeing you again. So in an earlier league, we had a really long, really close 3-game match against Day by Day, who is on green-black rock, so we know it's the mirror match. Good to see you again. Not so good to see the mirror match in a more general sense, though, because it's not really my favorite to play, but Kalitas is a good draw if we can ever get there with the lands. So the opponent led off on Inquisition, took away our Tarmogoyf, we play a Tomb and Pass, they're going to Inquisition us yet again. Take away our Bob, so there go both of our early proactive plays. They've got a Treetop Village as well, so it's a pretty good start for the opponent. Drawing that Swamp is fine. You know, we do eventually need to hit 4 lands for that Kalitas. Opponents just got the discard train rolling. Collective Brutality, and sure, they know they're a target, so they take away our Decay. Alright. And Hissing Quagmire, well, that is a pretty good draw, because it's going to let us potentially play the Kalitas next turn, and, of course, man lands in general are of high value in this matchup. The opponent agrees. He plays a Quagmire of his own, and will pass. We draw Skoos. Alright, pretty good card in the matchup, but here it's definitely Kalitas time. This is mana efficient, and even if they deal with him, it's just going to give our follow-up Skoos even more fuel, right? So the opponent's got something, and it is an Assassin's Trophy. Minor consideration to grab a Swamp there for the purposes of bluffing Fatal Push in case they want to think twice before firing up a man land, but with the Skoos in hand, I think we just get the better land, which is Forest. Oh boy, the opponent's got quite the curve here. It's Tracker into Fetch Land. Yeah, that's a tough one. Alright, we draw a Fetch Land of our own, so we'll run it out. We're going to play the Skoos, and we're going to pass. We're going to try to get the opponent. Hopefully they fetch on the end step here, and then we can trophy in a response. And they do. Good. So that actually works to our advantage. They're only going to get 1 clue off of this Tracker. It could be worse. If I were them, I think I might have considered just passing, you know, just leaving their fetch land uncracked and trying to force us to make the first move as far as that goes. But regardless, we get them with we get the Tracker with the trophy, and then we're going to go fetch while they are tapped out, just so we can make sure to get value out of our ooze in case they have yet more removal. They have Tarmogoyf, and then they do indeed have that removal, so what we're going to do is go ahead and eat the Tireless Tracker, and then, you know, there's not really much else to eat. I don't think the opponent's on Tasigur or anything, so, you know, shrinking their graveyard beyond the point where we've done it, not the most necessary thing, right? So Only activating once as well, because we know we're getting ramped off of trophy, allows us to hold up our trophy of our own here, which is very important to do in case that last card in their hand is an Inquisition or a Thoughtseize. It's not, so we could of course just trophy the Goyf on the end step, but with 7 mana now available to us, there's not really a reason to do that there. We can just go ahead and take the draw step, see what the draw step yields, see if we need to trophy that Goyf, right? So Inquisition is our draw, and we get a Tireless Tracker out of their hand. That is pretty good. And here we just pass, maybe planning to trophy the Goyf, maybe planning to try to block it with the Hissing Quagmire. And yeah, we're going to try to fire up this land and see if we can make this trade. Okay, looks like it. You know, manlands are good and all, but I think I'm pretty happy with that. The opponent's going to play their Blooming Marsh, and they're just going to pass, not trying to crack the clue aggressively here. Interesting. Okay, we draw another trophy. Sure, it's fine at this point. The ramp doesn't matter much, and of course it's just an answer to just about anything they could have. We're holding both of these up. It's very good against any potential discard they could find. Treetop Village will be animated. They're going to send it across, and we are going to trophy it away. I think I'm pretty happy to do that. Second main, they've got a Scooz. Well, that's a pretty good one. That's kind of a must answer, so sure, we'll just trophy it away here too. Opponent's going to gobble up a couple of our better creatures in response, and then the Scooz is gone. We draw a Tarmogoyf, okay? Not the best, not the worst. Definitely happy to have action there of any kind. So Goyf it will be, and the opponent... Ooh, Liliana of the Veil. That's a tough one. That's a tough one right now, so very nice for the opponent. Liliana and firing up the Quagmire, hitting us for 2. They've still got 1 card in hand, and it's back to us. Well, we draw Liliana of the Veil, so that is actually pretty solid for us. It allows us to, you know, have a Lily of our own, of course, that's significantly ahead of the other ones. Because they were tapped out for that Quagmire attack, we also get the last card out of their hand, which was an Assassin's Trophy, so that is all very nice. So, good draw. All in all, a good draw. The big problem is that they have the ability to pressure our Lily with this Hissing Quagmire. If they didn't have that manland, we would be in really good shape. And they draw Treetop Village for turn. Sure, so they've got the manlands. And they're going to fire up this one and hit her down to 2. You got it. Alright, we draw an Overgrown Tomb that is pretty miserable, to be honest. Our Lily is going to go bye-bye here, but we'll play it out and we'll take her up anyway just to make them do that. And the opponent will draw Tarmogoyf. Okay, it's looking a little bit scary on the other side of the table there. So the Treetop Village will take care of our Lily of the Veil. And now there's a whole big wide board to beat, and we draw Collective Brutality. So our Liliana of the Veil, like I said at the time, that was a nice draw step, but we needed a little bit more help beyond that, and we just haven't had it in these past couple turns. The Collective Brutality, here is an example of why I don't like it in the mirror, because if you, it's a very poor top deck in situations like this. It is sorcery speed, so it can't kill them, even the Hissing Quagmire. Obviously can't kill the Tarmogoyf, can't do anything to this Liliana, so we, you know, I guess we could hold it just to make them kind of tick up, but they're going to tick up anyway, so we just drain them for 2 with it. That's about the best we can do. And they play a Liliana the Last Hope off the top of their deck, and that's enough for me. We've seen enough. They've gonna, by the end of this turn, we will be at 12 on a 2-turn clock. They will have a Liliana at 4, Liliana of the Veil that is, and a Liliana the Last Hope. I guess probably ticking down to buy back like a Scavenging Ooze or something. Yeah, just unbeatable, especially game 1 where we don't have as many catch-up cards. So, that's the mirror for you, my friends. I don't think we did anything incorrect here. The opponent got the flurry of discard effects early on where they are at their best, and we saw them a little bit later. You know, we saw an Inquisition mid-game, which, to be fair, ended up being okay, but this Brutality at the end, We needed a really good card there, and we got one that was not really good. Between that and the Tomb, we were already a little bit behind because they had the man lands down and we didn't. But those late game top decks, you know, they just put us away. So good game, well played to our opponent day by day, and let's take a quick look at how to sideboard. Okay, my friends, so against the BG Rock Mirror in the Civil War, I'm sure you've seen me do this before, and if not, yeah, what are you doing with your life? Come on, watch my channel more, it's great. So, you know by now that I do not like the discard. Inquisition, Thoughtseize, Collective Brutality, they can all go away as far as I'm concerned. We like to cut a land in the mirror match as well, and I guess it's got to be the Blooming Marsh, even though, you know, there may be an argument for like a basic land or something, but ultimately I think getting taxed out of our basics is not where we want to be. So definitely think either way, whichever one we cut, we can cut a land. And then the other, you know, we might examine that a little bit further, but really we just have a whole lot that we like to bring in. So with these cards out, what do we like? Well, Nissa Vital Force, Liliana the Last Hope, absolutely amazing. Definitely some of our highest value cards alongside Kitchen Finks. Kitchen Finks is very good. And then we want all of this removal. Maelstrom Pulse, Engineered Explosives, Damnation. Those are all good X for 1 potential cards. And then there's Deathmark as well. Definitely worth bringing in, even though it misses Dark Confidant and Kalitas. Still like it. Still a good 1 mana removal spell that hits a majority of the opposing creatures. And then Fulminator Mage is honestly playable, very playable. Nile Spellbomb is even playable, but we just don't simply have room for Nile Spellbomb of this build. So I think at least 1 Fulminator Mage comes in for sure. Against Jund and Abzan and Sultai, Fulminator is better. Here, he's still good, but just not as necessary against the straight-up Golgari. So we're going to be on the play here for Game 2, and for that game, I would run it exactly like this, exactly as you see. And for Game 3, you know, there's an argument for maybe, if there is a Game 3 where I'm going to be on the draw, maybe cutting away a Liliana because she's not as good on the draw, bringing back a second Fulminator. But either way, threats and answers, my friends. Threats and answers are what we want. Okay, on the play here for the BGX Mirror Game 2, and the hand is strong. The hand is really strong, actually. We've got a very well-balanced hand. We just need to hit that third land, and we're going to be off to the races. Very good hand to be on the play with a prospect of turn 2 Bob into turn 3 Liliana. Opponent goes Overgrown Tomb Pass, and we draw Scavenging Ooze. You know, fine card in the matchup, but it's not our third land, so we're really hoping this Dark Confidant lives. That's definitely great in so many ways, including the prospect of hitting our third land. However, the opponent has a Fatal Push. Not to be. We untap, we draw a Forest. Okay, so we hit our third land. All is well in the world. It is very clearly Liliana of the Veil Time. Now we're going to tick up, of course, what do we discard? Well, we've got so much gas in hand, it's really hard to say. We want to keep all these cards, but I think Assassin's Trophy is just the worst at this particular stage of the game. We would love to be able to, you know, potentially decay something next turn, then tick up again, or Edict and play a creature. Either way, we're looking at probably just a 1-spell turn next turn, unless we top deck a land, then maybe 2. But regardless, I don't think we need to ramp them with a trophy quite yet. So, regardless of anything I just said, they have a decay for our Liliana, so best laid plans, am I right? But we draw yet another land, so we're hitting the lands off the top that we need to stay competitive with this hand, so that is awesome. Tracker into Swamp, nice turn, and we'll pass it back. The opponent's got a Scooze. Alright, that's a good one. That's a good one as always. They make land drop number 4. It's a fetch land. They're going to crack it. And they're going to trophy away our tracker. Alright, well, you know, stops us from getting any more clues, which is nice, but at the same time it allows us to have a really mana-efficient turn. That Swamp was not accomplishing anything there untapped, but now we get to crack a clue on the end step, which is nice. And we draw Liliana off the clue and Overgrown Tomb for turn. Well, that is pretty good. So we're very happy to go right back on the Liliana train here and edict away the Skoos. Play out a Skoos of our own. And, you know, there is an argument also for running out that Overgrown Tomb because it is a shock land, and because if we assume we're going heavy on a Liliana plan, we just want to empty our hand as much as possible. However, the prospect of top-decking a Tireless Tracker next turn is still good enough that I would like to hang on to that. There's also the prospect of them not presenting an Abrupt Decay target this turn, so then I can maybe just pitch my land to Lily's +1 instead of the Decay, right? So definitely one worth thinking about, but in the end I chose to hang on to that land. Opponent's got a Goyf, and they're going to pass with 2 land open, 2 cards in hand. Okay, so on our draw step they've got to play. They're going to draw step Trophy away the Liliana. Sure, you got it. We'll take the land. And here I think we just kind of clear the board. We're going to decay that Tarmogoyf. We're going to grow the Ooze as much as it can, eating away Goyf, Skoos, and Fulminator Mage, becoming a 5/5, gaining us 3 life. Nice 8-point life swing this turn, and we also have deployed our Treetop Village. Opponent's got a Verdant Catacombs and 1 unknown in hand. No manlands on board, so we are in control. Hissing Quagmire is our draw. That's pretty nice. It's obviously there are better plays, but there are better top decks rather. But this allows us to just fully fire up both of these manlands with impunity, and I think that's better than just growing the Ooze by 1, eating our own Tireless Tracker, which we kind of want to leave there anyway in case we draw a Last Hope, right? So I think we would have fired up both these manlands regardless, but the fact that we have a backup Quagmire in hand, yeah, that makes this even better. And the opponent's just got nothing, so they just take a massive hit. They get hit for 10, they go down to 4, we play another Quagmire, and the opponent takes their draw and scoops it up. Life is good. So you can see, my friends, the manlands were the big mirror breaker here in Game 2, just as they were for the opponent here in the same match in Game 1. To be fair, maybe the Ooze would have gotten us there by itself. It doesn't seem like the opponent had much of anything, at least until this draw step. Maybe they finally drew a piece of spot removal, but they kill the Ooze, they're just dead to the manlands, so who cares? They just scoop, right? But so it's hard to say, but you can see how these manlands, they're just such good flood insurance. They're so good at pressuring opposing planeswalkers. They play around board sweepers really well. They're just awesome. We love our Treetop Village, and we love our Hissing Quagmire. This land doesn't get enough respect. It's a good one, too. So, good game, well played. Let's go to Game 3. Alright, my friends, here we are for Game 3, and we see the arbitrary nature of this chat and game log. Sometimes they give it to us, sometimes they don't. Whatever. We'll just accept what they give to us, right? We got bigger problems than that, though. We got a one-lander. We've got a one-lander. Now, we are on the draw. It is a fantastic one-lander. Every card in this hand is great. And we have a little bit of a extra chance of actually curving out with our land drops to, because we are on the draw. So let's assume we curve out with our land drops. We can go potentially Fatal Push their turn 2 play if we manage to, let's say draw Blooming Marsh on turn 1. We run out the Marsh. We push their turn 2 play on their end step. We play Bob turn 2. Then we curve out from there. We got Finks, Fulminator, Decay, Skoos. It's amazing. However, little bit risky, and I generally do not advise keeping the one-landers unless the reward is absolutely immense. I think the reward here is decent, but we just have too many 3-drops to make it like a really high reward keep, right? Like, we can't really just operate on 2 lands, and because we're on the draw especially, they have so many answers to Bob. Not only all the kill spells, but both Liliana's killing the Bob on curve as well. So, sadly, I think we do take a mulligan. And this is actually a really good 6. We still have the Dark Confidant that if we can protect him, he can take over. We've got a catch-up card in the form of Engineered Explosives, and we got a really good grindy value card in the form of Liliana. We've got the lands to kind of play it, although right now we only have single black mana. Still, this is a fine keep. Verdant Catacombs will go to the bottom despite the fact we don't have double black. I think we do need more action. And there's Skoos for turn, sure. So, Tomb tapped, pass to you. They've got double Blooming Marsh and a Dark Confidant. Okay, scary stuff, scary stuff. And unfortunately, we do not draw removal, so this is very bad. We don't want them to ever get a draw off of Bob, but we don't really have a choice. We just kind of have to play a Bob of our own. And this could be absolutely disastrous, my friends, if they go untap, draw the card off of Bob, land drop into either Liliana is awful. Thankfully, like, we breathe a sigh of relief. Like, we're very far behind still, because we mulliganed and now they've got their Bob is unanswered, our Bob has been answered. But we breathe a sigh of relief that it's only a Fatal Push, and not Liliana the Last Hope ticking up, or even Lily of the Veil ticking down would be bad. Alright, they play out a Scavenging Ooze, and they pass to us. We draw another Skoos for turn. Well, very interesting spot here. So, of course, we cannot play Liliana the Last Hope, even if we wanted to run her out, tick her up, kill the Bob. We can't do it. We don't have double black. So, options here are basically to play out a Skoos or to play out the Engineered Explosives. And I think here it is just pretty much necessary to play the EE. It sucks if they have removal for it. It kind of sucks that they get to play around it a little bit more, but, you know, we just need to answer these cards. And they're going to absolutely run away with the game and indeed end the game if we don't. So the opponent goes Tireless Tracker into a tapped Overgrown Tomb. Alright, so that diversifies their threats nicely. It allows them to continue accruing advantage, but at least they didn't kill our EE, right? That's the silver lining for us. So still an amazing curve route from the opponent here. And they crack in for 4, pass back to us, and we draw a Swamp. Okay, this is very interesting. So once again, we have a couple of very compelling options. We can hold up. Well, I guess we wouldn't hold it up. We would just crack the EE so they don't get yet another card off of Bob. And then we could play a Skoos. And then it's kind of Skoos versus Tracker, and we have some more cards, they have some more cards. Who knows how it goes from there. However, the other option is just to leave our Engineered Explosives there and cast this Damnation, which is going to take care of their entire board. It looks like a 3-for-1, but it's not really, because their Bob has already been a 3-for-1 on its own right. The Tracker's made a clue, but it's still, what a good catch-up for us. Now, here's the problem, though. We've got this EE still sitting there kind of awkwardly on 2, and our proactive threats are both 2-drops, right? So, definitely in just an unusual spot, but I think Damnation there was still the correct play. They've got yet another Tracker and yet another land. Yikes. Major yikes. However, the top of our deck does provide, you know, Deathmark, again, where they're getting the advantage off of this exchange, but definitely really nice to have an answer to that Tracker before it gets too totally out of control. And then we'll go ahead and play out a Skoos, even though the EE is sitting there on 2. We've just gotta do something with our mana. And unfortunately, we did not have the triple black. We would have needed that turn for Lily the Last Hope plus Deathmark. Opponents cracking their clues, 1 on the end step, 1 as they untap. Field of Ruin, Dark Confidant, sure. Tarmogoyf. Okay, so they're consciously playing 2 2-drops out into a known Engineered Explosives. Now, if I crack it next turn, it's a 2-for-2. Alright, because I sweep up my own ooze as well. But that is very interesting, because that just shows me, or it makes me suspicious anyway, that they do not have other threats in hand that are not 2-drops. I think they would have clearly would have played a 3-mana Planeswalker or Kalidas or another Tracker or anything besides a 2-drop, but it just seems like they probably have lands and 2-drops and maybe some spot removal, but very interesting. I have to confess that I didn't think the EE would have a decent opportunity, but kind of right away, it looks like it's reasonably well positioned again. We're in the same boat, though. We've got a bunch of 2-drops in hand, but we also have this Liliana the Last Hope. So, very, very interesting. So, what I'm thinking here is I'm going to attack. And if the opponent doesn't block, then I can just maybe eat a couple things out of their graveyard, or maybe not, maybe just take my 3 points of damage. Either way, I'm going to plan to crack my EE. And yeah, probably crack the EE, then deploy a Tarmogoyf afterwards. So I'm just kind of trying to get my free damage in, and if they block in an unexpected way, then I'm willing to change my plan. So the opponent looks like they're interested in blocking, which is, again, not what I expected, right? But here's what we can do. We can go ahead and gobble up one of their creatures, get big, gobble up another one, and now it's a 5/5. And that is actually just going to 2-for-1 then. Again, it's a little bit awkward in a few different ways because we can't really play out anything else in our hand this turn. It's been mana inefficient. First, we haven't had enough black mana. Now we don't have enough green mana this time. But, and this EE is still, just kind of sitting there. But that was honestly, again, way better than I could have hoped for. They've got a Blooming Marsh and they're going to pass. Okay. Maelstrom Pulses our draw. Well, I think it's finally a window to run out this Liliana the Last Hope. Once again, we're in for an awkward turn mana-wise, but the guaranteed 2-for-1 is too good to pass up, right? They don't have manlands to pressure her. This is very nice for us. So she reveals a couple fresh cards, actually. We've got all kinds of things to choose from. They're all pretty viable, to be honest. Maybe not so much Fulminator Mage here, but in the end, I went with the Tireless Tracker because the tracker makes... We can just kind of hang on to the tracker right now until we draw a land. And we can run out other things, and we can just wait till the tracker is good to deploy her, basically. Opponent's got a Hissing Quagmire, which is pretty nice. And then they're going to field our field while we're tapped low to protect their Quagmire. So that's a solid enough play. But it looks like that's all they've got. They're going to pass with 3 unknowns in hand, and we draw Verdant Catacombs. Well. The buyback of the tracker is paying dividends immediately, so we'll play tracker, we'll play out the Catacombs, and then we're going to just go ahead and pass for the same reason that I advised the opponent to maybe pass. Maybe they should have passed, I believe it was in game 1, because we just want to kind of incentivize them to make the first move. Now, this is changing things, though, because they're going to fire up the Quagmire and send it at our Liliana the Last Hope. And you know what? As good as Tireless Tracker is, I'm actually interested in potentially blocking. So I'm going to fetch main phase first to see if that prompts the opponent into any removal. It doesn't, or they don't have it. Then we'll go ahead and crack the clue, and that'll just better inform our blocking decision. And we've got a Dark Confidant, which is a card advantage engine in its own right. So I'm inclined to take this trade here. The tracker's already got us some advantage, and we can, of course, even buy her back if we want to. So keeping the Liliana the Last Hope around, I think, is very solid, especially because the EE is protecting her from them going wide with a bunch of 2-drops. So let's see what else the opponent has. It's a Tarmogoyf. Okay, that's, again, we can protect against that. So we're going to take up the Lily, and we are just simply going to trade the EE, finally crack the EE, trade it away for the Tarmogoyf, because we simply have too many 2-drops in hand to keep that around. That EE ended up being utilized way differently than I expected, but it was actually amazing. I think it kind of forced the opponent to sequence in some less than ideal ways. And we'll run out a Dark Confidant. You could also maybe run out the Skoos there would be viable, but I went with the Bob. And they've got a tracker, okay, and a land. So the opponent stays in it. They've got the... we all know how powerful by now Tireless Tracker is in the mirror, and they're going to crack a clue immediately, but they've got nothing they want to do. So good enough for me. We untap with our Bob. That is awesome. Bob flips a Blooming Marsh, and we have Liliana of the Veil as our draw step. Well, that is perfect. So first things first, let's play out that Lily. Let's edict away your tracker. Then, before we do anything else, let's attack with the Bob. I don't expect that they have removal. I think they would have just used it before it was our turn, but we get them for 2. And then I think we just keep getting our 2-for-1s. We want to keep her around, which is why we didn't 2-for-1. Why didn't we didn't cash her in last turn? But now I'm not trying to win the game with her ultimate. I'm trying to get so far ahead that I'm going to win, just with my cards the old-fashioned way. So now we're very happy to tick her down. And once again, I think Tireless Tracker is just simply too good to pass up. However, here it is Tarmogoyf time. We'll hang on to that Blooming Marsh because we know we have, of course, a tracker in hand. But it is Tarmogoyf time. The opponent's got nothing. No land drop, no plays. Bob is going to flip a tracker. Okay. Let's tick up our Liliana, and we'll pitch another Bob that's fairly redundant piece at this point. And the opponent pitches a Forest. We'll take up our Last Hope, and let's attack for 8. Okay, the opponent's down to 9. Excuse me, that was an attack for 7. And then we're going to play Tracker. This diversifies our threats a little bit more along the CMC. And again, just making the clue we're so far ahead on resources. We're not even that afraid of Damnation. I just kind of want to present lethal. And the opponent takes their draw step, and we do indeed have lethal. So that is going to be game. Awesome. Awesome to come back winning both post-sideboard games in the mirror match, and our sideboard cards putting in a lot of work here. Damnation, Deathmark, Engineered Explosives all were key, and perhaps just as key was this Liliana the Last Hope, of course, one of which is a sideboard card as well. So by the end of things, we were firmly in control, but it looked pretty sketchy there at the beginning for a while, but we were able to catch up with the Damnation. We were able to use this Engineered Explosives as kind of a looming shadow, kind of a threat in the matchup. The opponent seemed like they were a little bit flooded on 2-drops, so it did a lot of good work in deterring them from really pressing their advantage in the mid-game. And then we were able to force them into some unusual sequencing, maybe some unusual blocks, and we were able to catch back up to the point where, after mulliganing, and after having no answer to their Dark Confidant for a few turns, and being on the draw, by the end of this game, we were just so far ahead, it's ridiculous. So, just goes to show you how this matchup, it's not over if you have to mulligan. It's not over if you get a little bit behind. As long as you've got these catch-up cards in your 75, you can catch up, and that's what we did here. So, great game day by day. Thanks for the conversation, and keep rocking. And we start off this league at 1-0. Feels good, my friends. Let's go to round 2. Okay, my friends, we're on the play here for round 2, and I don't know about you, but I love seeing hands with one of each Liliana in them and enough lands to play them, so that alone is enough. If that wasn't enough, we've got Tarmogoyf as well. It's a little light on targeted interaction, but it's a very, very, very powerful hand in a blind game 1, and let's hope it's a matchup where it lines up well. Opponent's going to go Stomping Ground and pass, so that could be a few different things, but of course I'm a little bit afraid of Lightning Bolts in the deck in general. Unfortunately, we can't really protect our Tarmogoyf from that, but we'll run it out anyway because it's likely to be good against any kind of a red deck if it lives. And the opponent's going to go get a Mountain and Sakura Tribe Elder, so we unfortunately are against a Valakut deck. This is pretty much our worst top-tier matchup. The only deck that I think is better against us than Valakut is Living End, and Living End is not really a high-tier deck, fortunately, right? So, Valakut is, again, our worst tier matchup. That said, we've got a really nice curve for it. We missed out on the turn 1 discard, but turn 2 Tarmogoyf into turn 3 Lily of the Veil on the play is very, very nice. And I'm actually going to choose to pick Liliana the Last Hope here because she does not accomplish much against a Valakut deck. And going to the graveyard is going to grow the Tarmogoyf with an unusual type right off the bat. It also allows us to keep these other cards. Scooz is a little bit whatever, but it's at least a body. But Thoughtseize is great. Field of Ruin is potentially useful as well, depending on how they sequence their lands, right? So I think Liliana the Last Hope might look a little bit weird to people who are not the most familiar with this matchup, but I think it's actually the correct pitch. Opponent gets rid of a land, and I'll just point something out. The reason the Valakut deck is so tough for us to beat is because we can't really stop them from hitting their land drops with our discard spells, with our spot removal. They just keep making land drops, and then even if we Thoughtseize away their Titan or their Scapeshift, eventually they can just top deck another one. So the fact that their board development is literally just making land drops and casting ramp spells, that's what's tough for us to beat. But that's also why Liliana of the Veil is so good, because she's just forcing them to discard gas one way or another, like their land drops qualify as gas, right? So if we get her down nice and early. Now, this is super interesting. The opponent's not really respecting the power of our Tarmogoyf, and to be fair to them, it's only a 2-3 right now, but they're actually using the Elder to pressure our Liliana. They're never going to get her off the board unless they pair it with a Lightning Bolt, but it's going to stop her from ulting on curve, which, of course, would be really nice. We draw Swamp for turn, not very exciting, and we see a hand full of lands plus Prime Time, sure, so obviously Titan goes, and then we will play Field of Ruin out, but there's no need to activate it yet. We're saving that for a Valakut, potentially, and then we're just going to lose this Swamp. We'll take up. They lose Arid Mesa. And we're going to go to attacks. Send in the Goyf. Pass to the opponent. Opponent drew a Valakut, so they'll play it. And they'll pass to us. Now they're having to sit back with the Circular Tribe Elder, so sure. On the end step, I'm going to go ahead and eat that Primeval Titan, just to spread out my damage a little more, make their chump blocking a little less useful. Verdant Catacombs, that is a poor draw. That's unfortunate. We really wanted this to be something great here this turn. Unfortunately, it's just a land. But we'll take up the Liliana. We get a mountain out of their hand. We send in the creatures, and they're going to chump the Goyf. And then sack. So, good enough for me. The opponent is just continuing to make land drops. And let's see what they got here. Search for Tomorrow. Okay, more land drops. And there's going to be a Valakut trigger off of this. Sure, you got it. Potentially should have fielded the Valakut in response to the Search for Tomorrow there. But, you know, we are not winning the game via a Liliana ultimate. We are winning the game via beats. We just need to fade their next draw step, basically. So I drew Tireless Tracker for turn, and I really thought about playing her, but in the end I just decided, you know what, we tick up instead. We tick up instead without playing the Tireless Tracker, because Tireless Tracker does not change our clock at all. In fact, pitching the tracker makes our clock a little bit better by 1 point of damage. And then, if they do try to Scapeshift us, we can pull the old Field of Ruin trick and destroy a land while the Scapeshift is on the stack. But regardless, the tracker there was not a relevant factor in terms of being a board presence. We're up out of range of Anger of the Gods, even if they main deck it. Both of our creatures are up out of range, so playing the tracker does not change anything. So therefore, I think it's better, again, to tick up, to pitch, to leave our Field of Ruin up, to leave, to grow our Tarmogoyf by 1, even though that doesn't really matter either. But regardless, the opponent drew a blank for turn, and that's just going to do it. That's just going to be game. So, feels good, my friends, to steal game 1 from Valakut. This is a very hard matchup, and, we just had the right type of clock and disruption. It was not a perfect curve out by us, but it was a pretty solid one. Turn 2 Tarmogoyf is the best play you can have here. turn 3 Liliana is also the best play you can have here on turn 3. And then from there, you know, it could have been better. We did finally come up with the Thoughtseize on turn 4 to take away the Titan, which was huge. Then, you know, Scooz is a little bit medium, but it was enough. It was enough. And the opponent did not find the cards they needed to beat our Clock plus Disruption. So we get them, and let's take a look at the sideboard. Okay, my friends, so against Titan Shift, well, you may have guessed that Fulminator Mage is our actual best card. Very, very nice to just have a Stone Rain effect and Surgical Extraction for Valakut or for the namesake cards of Primeval Titan or Titan Shift, depending on the texture of the game. Very, very decent as well. I also actually like Deathmark here because killing the Titan, like the Titan coming down, is very bad, but it's not necessarily GG if you can kill it next turn, right? So, again, depends on the texture of the game, but Deathmark to kill Titan, to kill some of the value green creatures they might play post-side, like Obstinate Baloth, definitely a viable inclusion. Maelstrom Pulse is fine for that reason. It's also going to hit, you know, if they have cards like Prismatic Omen, it can hit that too. Not necessarily the highest priority targets. Colony Heart Expedition is another one, but it is there nonetheless. And then we can also consider Nissa Vital Force, who's just basically a 5/5 haste in the matchup, which for 5 mana is not necessarily a modern power level play, but definitely might be better than some other things we're up to. And Collective Brutality is solid because taking away a ramp spell is good, taking away Escape Shift is also good. Now, will we have room for all this? You know, I'm not necessarily sure, but I do think Fatal Push is pretty bad. Abrupt Decay, again, that can hit the Colony Hearts of the deck, but that can't hit much more, right? We like Pulse better because it can hit the big stuff as well. So I think Decay can pretty clearly come out. I mentioned Game 1 how Liliana the Last Hope doesn't accomplish much, to the point where we pitched her to our other Liliana, so out she comes. From there, you know, I think we can make 2 other cuts pretty easily. They're probably going to just be slower threats, right? So these 8 come in, and I like here, you know, Kalidas is not necessarily at his best, but the lifelink is irrelevant in some scenarios, and the fact that it survives Bolt and Anger, also relevant in some scenarios. So, you know, Kalidas is not the best, but I could see leaving him in and cutting like 1 each of Tracker and Scooz. I think there are arguments for cutting 2 Tracker, no Scooz, or maybe even 2 Scooz and no Tracker, because Tracker is just excruciatingly slow in this matchup. And Scooz is just very underwhelming as well, but I think seeing either in multiples is kind of a disaster. So for that reason, I think cutting 1 of each is probably just statistically going to give us the least likelihood of having clunky hands. And there are windows in which, you know, like a turn 2 Scooz can get you there. If it becomes a 4/4 pretty quickly, it can get you there with heavy disruption. And there are scenarios in which the game gets really grindy and like a Tireless Tracker is actually kind of decent. So that is how I sideboarded here, and let us take a look at Game 2. Alright, my friends, we're on the draw against Valakut. Our worst top-tier matchup, they keep 7, they're on the play, we've got an unplayable 7, so not off to the best start. Yeah, you know, this is a fine 6. It really is. We've got our 2 best options for a turn 2 play in the form of Bob and Goyf, and we'll certainly bottom that Verdant Catacombs. We lack disruption, so it's not looking good, but I think this is probably better than going to 5. If our turn 2 play sticks and we can find like a Fulminator Mage for turn 3, then we might be in business. We're going to play out the Verdant Catacombs there just because we're kind of interested in thinning after having drawn that Field of Ruin. Alright, the opponent's got a turn 2 Relic of Progenitus. Well, that is a bit annoying. And then we draw Inquisition right on time, right? So, a little bit awkward, but I think we've got to be mana efficient here. We've got to be proactive. We're going to play out the Bob because the Goyf is going to be made very unimpressive by the Relic. However, the opponent's got Lightning Bolt for Bob, and then they're going to Relic us, so pretty awful start, all things considered. We're drawing things in the wrong order, we've mulliganed, we lack Disruption. The opponent's Search for Tomorrow from turn 1 will resolve. They'll play a Valakut, they'll Relic us, they will pass. Alright, Collective Brutality is our draw. So, Inquisition is where we will begin, and if we see a hand of only lands, well, that's kind of actually a little bit frightening because we know they're going to curve out to the entirety of what they need as far as lands go. And basically we just have to hope they brick for the entire game. So what we're going to do is run out our Tarmogoyf. We are going to try to deal with the Relic at some other point, basically, and we'll untap. Yeah, we're just drawing Fields of Ruin, not the very best, but let's attack with the Goyf. See if the opponent wants to shrink it, and they do. So here's where we're going to field their Valakut. There are potentially somewhat better windows for this, but this does grow the Goyf a little bit. Makes it a more respectable 2-3 than 3-2. Now here, there might have also been an argument for trophying away the Relic and forcing them to crack it, but that seems just so bad to me. We are just absolutely doing nothing from there on out if we do so. And we're very dead to like a top deck Primeval Titan, anything like that. So, you know, tough to say. Tough to say. We're just kind of in a bad spot all around. Again, this is why Valakut's a tough one, my friends. So, land drop and pass from the opponent. Okay, we draw Thoughtseize, so we'll fire it off, and we just see a hand full of lands yet again. What can you do? What can you do, my friends? Well, we can attack for 2 with this Tarmogoyf. And once again, there's the consideration, do we trophy away that Relic or do we not? I guess we're kind of hoping they crack it on their own terms, getting a little bit anxious. And here, sure enough, they do. So that's fine with me. I'm glad I held on to the trophy. And let's see what they come up with. So, Farseek. Okay. They're ramping. They're deploying lands out of the hand. And they're passing. No need to field on the end step there. So, we'll untap. We'll play Collective Brutality. And we're sick of whiffing. We're sick of whiffing with our discard spells. So, we're just going to use that, as sad as it might be, to drain them for 2 and then we'll hit them for another 1 with Tarmogoyf. The one thing that we could have done here at some point, post-Relic, basically, is to use the trophy as basically an ability to give the Tarmogoyf a +1/+1 counter. You know, 1 black, 1 green instant, put +1/+1 counter on target Tarmogoyf. Again, I can't really convince myself that that is worthwhile here. I just don't think it is. We draw Tracker, sure. I mean, that's a card, but you can see how anemic our draws have been here. Not the very best, and but I do think we have no real choice but to play out the Tracker as just kind of a Balduvian Barbarians at this point, just another beater. Yep, they've gotten a Braid for the Tracker. Well, at least our Goyf's a little bit bigger now. Liliana the Veil, alright, that's a draw I can get behind. Big problem with this is it puts us shields down with these trophies. We do not have triple black, so we cannot hold up trophy, but I think at this point we certainly have to use her. She's a big lifeline for us in the matchup. Opponent's been sitting on a Farseek, interesting. And just waiting for maybe a Valakut to make this better, or I suppose is just discard fodder for a potential Liliana. So let's see what the opponent has here, and it's a Primeval Titan. Well, wouldn't you know it, just as soon as we go shields down with our trophy, and after all that discard that whiffed, that's when they find the Titan, so pretty unlucky for us, but, you know, this is what the deck does, and they get a couple Valakuts, they play a Mountain out of hand, and down goes our Liliana. Alright, so Treetop Village is our draw, and here I went ahead and trophied the Titan, which was a mistake. I should have fielded a Valakut first. I was thinking I could respond here when I really just should have fielded the Valakut away first. So definitely get punished for that because the opponent has fetch lands to crack. They've just got it all, right? And again, to be fair, are we really beating this? Well, I mean, I'm not sure, but gotta play correctly either way. So I think the correct play there again was field first and then trophy. Just denies them the land drop off of trophy, basically, the extra Valakut trigger. But they put us all the way down to 1. So we'll attack for 5, put them all the way down to 1. It's a very, very close game. We play our Treetop Village, but I'm not sure if this Cinderglade is still in their hand, but either way, we are dead to a land drop, and they have a mountain, so sure. We were kind of dead, no matter how we sequenced there, as far as I can tell, on that turn. Now, the fact that we put them to 1, remember how I mentioned we could have used a trophy earlier as like a put a +1/+1 counter on Tarmogoyf? Well, as it turns out, that would have won us the game, while being a very, very poor play in every other way, besides just giving Tarmogoyf +1/+1, in between, like, when they cracked the relic and when they found the Titan. If we had grown the Goyf, we would actually have won this game. Now, that doesn't mean it was the correct line, because of course we want to save these trophies for Valakut the Molten Pinnacle, for Primeval Titan, for other actual threats. We don't want to just trade in, like, cast a spell to have them trade in a land for a land that otherwise doesn't do anything, just to grow our Tarmogoyf by 1. It seems very loose. But the way the game played out, the way it all worked out, that actually would have got us over the line, it seems. So, super interesting thing to consider for all of you for your games and for my own games in the future. Unfortunately, we just, more generally, we bricked, we dirtled, our Goyf was too small, they answered our Bob. It was just, it's a miracle we got as close as we did, honestly, to winning this game, but kind of an interesting one regardless. But in the end, Valakut just gets there, and we have to go to Game 3, so I will see you there. On the play here against Titan Shift for the deciding game, my friends, and our rotten luck continues. We've got a 1-lander, and we've got to throw that back. No question, it's not even that great of a reward if we keep it and we curve out with our land drops, right? So the opponent's going to keep 7 all 3 games. That's pretty bad news, to be honest. It's pretty bad news. But we have double Inquisition, we have man lands, we have trophy. Like, we have some interaction, but we need help. We don't need more of this type of interaction, so Pulse will go to the bottom. And we will lead on Blooming Marsh Inquisition. We see a 5-lander with Abrade and with Tireless Tracker, so they actually don't have any of their Escape Shift stuff, really. They just have, like, good interaction and value pieces. We're going to take away the tracker because we for sure don't want that card around, and we might be able to, in some worlds, leave an Abrade in hand for a little while if we draw something better to do. But we don't, so it's just, sure, Inquisition, take away the Abrade, leave them with a hand of nothing but land. Deploy our Hissing Quagmire and pass. Liliana of the Veil is in our hand. We really want that 3rd land on curve. Untapped land, please. Ooh, I never thought I'd say darn drawing a Fulminator Mage in this matchup, but that is a darn moment. Like, we really wanted to just curve out with the Lily. However, Fulminator is a very good play, obviously, in this matchup. So, on the end step here, we actually have the option to trophy away a Valakut just to be mana efficient, number 1. Number 2, to potentially have Surgical Extraction if we happen to find that off the top with a good target. And number 3, because we know we're going on the Liliana plan just to kind of empty out our hand, use our spells. So this is not like a clear-cut decision, in my opinion. But I actually decided to do it. I decided to go ahead, trophy away the Valakut on the end step, and we'll untap, we'll draw Deathmark. Well, that's an interesting one. And it wouldn't be bad to tick up, you know, to play the Lily, tick up, and then Deathmark, pitch Deathmark. But the problem with that is if they happen to have an Obstinate Baloth in hand, that's a little bit scary. And then we just pitched our answer to the Baloth, right? So I think it is safer and arguably just better anyway to Stone Rain them with a Fulminator. So that's what we'll do. Opponent's got a mountain and they're going to pass. Alright, Hissing Quagmire, so drawing a land here is pretty good. We wish it was an untapped one so we could threaten this Death Mark in the main phase if they have a Baloth, but we can't play scared of the Baloth, we just have to hope they don't have it. And we are going to pitch the Death Mark since we can't kill it this turn anyway. I think we just want the lands if they don't have it. And if they do have it, we're in trouble. But thankfully they don't have it, so they pitch a Forest, and they play a Valakut, they pass back to us. Alright, another Liliana, not the best draw. We wanted something proactive to put on the board here. That would have been great. But we'll take up the Lily. We lose our Lily, they lose a Flame Slash, and we'll try to send in this Treetop Village here. See if it connects. And they've got a Lightning Bolt, but they're not going to point it at the 8th village. They're going to point it at our Liliana. Sure, you got it. 3 to you, and we will pass. Okay, opponent's got a Relic off the top. And that Arid Mesa we knew about, so they've got one unknown in hand. We draw Tarmogoyf. Alright, pretty awkward timing, to be fair, with the Relic coming right before we find a Goyf, but we'll still play out the Goyf, we'll take up the Lily, get that last card out of their hand, which was a Mountain. Still on our turn, the opponent's going to crack that Relic. And the Goyf is a 0-1. They've got 2 cards in hand, they just pass. Alright, Overgrown Tomb. Our draws have been pretty poor in positions where we could really take advantage of some good stuff. But we'll take the Lily up, we get a Valakut out of their hand, and then we're going to try to attack with a 3-3 Treetop and a 1-2 Tarmogoyf. See what happens. They just take it. Back over to them. Once again, no land drop, and they will pass. That's pretty good for us, to be honest. Field of Ruin is our draw. So we'll play out the field, we'll take up the Lily, and they're just scooping to that. A little bit surprising if you ask me. They could have maybe just, you know, the game's not going to last that much longer. Why not just play it out, in my opinion? Their Escape Shift deck, they could... I don't know what's in their hand. I don't know what they'd be sitting on that's not like Baloth or a ramp spell or a kill spell or lands. I don't know what it could be. But, you know, if they've got like Prime Time in hand, yeah, why not just play it out another turn? Maybe they have Escape Shift, which is not as useful here. Who knows, but in any case, we will never know because the opponent scoops it up. And to be fair, we were definitely pretty favored from this position, right? We can animate Treetop Village and hold up Field of Ruin, maybe even proactively use the Field of Ruin this turn. We've got Liliana running them out of resources. It's all looking pretty good for us, but once more, I'm a bit surprised that the opponent just said they'd seen enough here. At the end of Game 3, Turn 9, I would have played it out myself, but... regardless, my friends, we do the near impossible. Well, I don't want to exaggerate. We do the unfavorable. We take down Titan Shift, our worst tiered matchup. Feels amazing. Feels amazing. That takes us to 2-0. I'll see you for round 3. Okay, friends, we are on the play here in round 3 with a pretty well-balanced hand. It's got a lot to like. In a blind game 1, I don't think there's any rationale to throw this back. I did decide, though, to run out the Verdant Catacombs. You could actually play just about any land there and it would be fine. I ran out the Catacombs just because this gives me the most flexibility. Like, if it's, you know, if I want to Fatal Push something turn 1, I can just go get a Swamp and that's totally fine. If not, if I want to get the last Overgrown Tomb out of my deck, I can do that. There's a lot going on. That we don't know about, and with this sheer variety of hands in our of lands in our hand, plus what else is going on, I kind of want the Catacombs out there. We can fetch a Forest around turn 1 Blood Moon, all that kind of stuff. But this is not a turn 1 Blood Moon deck. This is traditional Affinity, going Darksteel Citadel, Welding Jar, Springleaf Drum, Memnite into Vault Scourge. Okay. The good old-fashioned 4-spell turn 1. Seems pretty good. So, obviously there are bigger payoffs in their deck than Vault Scourge. That much is clear, but it's also clear that I'm going to tap out next turn for a threat. So for that reason, I'm thinking, alright, I need either number 1 to draw more interaction to win this game, or number 2 to have my Tarmogoyf just race them, just, like, beat them. And In both of those scenarios, either the scenario of me drawing more interaction or the scenario of making my turn 2 Tarmogoyf a game-winning play, I think both scenarios incentivize me to Fatal Push this Scourge on turn 1. No matter whether they crack Welding Jar or not, it's going to grow my Goyf, and it's going to be a mana-efficient play. But they just let the Scourge die, so it's a little bit scary, because it means they do indeed have another payoff card in hand, but that's not entirely unexpected, so we just play out our turn 2 Goyf, and we pass it back. Opponent goes Darksteel Citadel into Master of Ethereum, tapping the Memnite to get it out. Well, that's actually quite rough. Master of Ethereum is not really a card that was as much on my radar. And just the big body of this actually makes me leaning on like a 4 or 5 Tarmogoyf look a little bit silly right now. And unfortunately, we do not draw any more interactions. So we could play the Liliana of the Veil, we could Edict them, and then the Master of Ethereum, assuming they have more artifacts to play next turn, is gigantic. And whether they attack us or they attack the Liliana, we're probably pressed into chumping with the Tarmogoyf. So what I decided to do here is run out the Skoos instead. As things stand, we can present a double block. Probably won't stay that way, but we could present it. And more importantly, it kind of buys us time to either set up a board state where the Liliana's Edict is actually a little bit more effective, because we're happier to chump with the Skoos next turn, or, again, we could draw more interaction. Second Springleaf Drum for the opponent doesn't really matter. If they do have a Signal Pest, though, going wide at all is pretty bad, and, double Signal Pest, again, they're scarier cards, but them going wide like this, yeah, it's not good for us. So the Master coming in is a 9/9 to us, and I think we need to take this hit. I think we can afford to take exactly one hit, and really hope for something great off the top, and it's an Inquisition right after they empty their hand completely. So, not very good, my friends, not very good for us at all. All we can do is run out this Liliana, Edict them, and we're going to be able to gain a life with the Skoos, but we are in chump block mode. Okay, the opponent rips another Signal Pest off the top, you got it. So will they just send in the Master, or is it going to be the whole board? Well, it is the whole board for sure. Yeah, it makes sense. These pests have evasion, so we chump with the Skoos, we'll gain a life. And we'll go to 5, and we draw land off the top. So, yeah, we needed more interaction, and we drew land, Inquisition land. Not going to cut it against a pretty solid start from the Affinity player game 1. Now, in retrospect, if I had hung on to the Fatal Push, that would have lined up better against Master of Ethereum, but of course they have the Welding Jar to protect it. So I think, without knowing what their progression was like, my decision to push the Vault Scourge was correct. In hindsight, having known their progression, it would be better to save that, of course, for Master. But again, they had it covered with Welding Jar. We didn't have any other interaction. I think we were just pretty much done. Pretty much done for here, no matter what we did. So that's going to happen game 1 against Affinity a lot, guys. Like, you don't know what you're up against. They're a really fast deck, but they're relatively fragile to interaction, right? So it's going to improve a whole lot post-side. Let's take a look at what to do there. Alright, my friends, so we are against robots, and this is good old-fashioned, colorless / multicolored with sideboard cards robots. Not these newfangled ones with hardened scales and lots of green cards. Nope, this is good old-fashioned traditional Affinity. Granted, the sideboarding protocols are pretty much the same, very similar in any case, but regardless, what do we want? Well, we want all the stuff that kills a wide board, so Pulse, EE, Damnation, Lily the Last Hope, the usual suspects. All of these cards are very nice against Affinity. Otherwise, none of this stuff over here on the left is particularly appealing. We do like some number of Fulminator Mage for sure, because killing the manlands is actually very relevant, and we can actually punish their land base pretty hard if the game gets grindy as well. Collective Brutality is perhaps not as good as these other ones, but it does kill most of their payoff cards, before they start growing. besides that Master of Ethereum that got us game 1. And it gets around Welding Jar as well, just like Lily the Last Hope's +1 does. So I think all 4 of these are definites, and we're certainly going to bring in some number of this remaining 4 cards, but let's see what comes out. Thoughtseize, I think, can just get cut. You saw how bad that even relatively early Inquisition was. We drew it turn 4, and they were already empty-handed. So Thoughtseize is even worse. Losing 2 life is not something we can afford to do against Affinity. That said, a little bit of, like a turn 1 discard spell can really cripple their progressions, but that's why I think we leave in the Inquisitions and hope we hit them in the first couple turns and dispense with the Thoughtseize. So Lily of the Veil is pretty poor here. They just go so wide. She's usually very clunky, so we cut at least 3, maybe all 4, depending on your configuration of your exact 75, but I think we can leverage exactly 1, as you might have heard me say before, to a reasonable degree. Beyond that, Tireless Tracker is very slow to the point where I'm willing to cut multiples. Scooz is also a little bit clunky, a little bit slow, a little bit underwhelming. So those cards can, in theory, come out. Looks like we're going to have the slots to bring in all 4 of these, so let's just do that. And we're going to be on the play. So on the play, sure, we can leverage 1 Liliana of the Veil. I think that's totally fine. And once again, I'll just kind of hedge. We'll just cut 1 Scooz, 1 Tracker. I think that is perfectly reasonable for that last slot. And, if we make it to game 3, we're going to be on the play. Maybe you bring back a Scooz. It's a little bit more of a stabilizing force and cut away, this last Lily of the Veil. It's really these last few slots are pretty nebulous and not necessarily all that important. So I like to hedge. I like to hedge with my deck building in general, and I like to hedge with my sideboarding. So my preferred configuration is cut a Scooz, cut a Tracker, leave 1 Liliana of the Veil in, leveraging low numbers of these cards I think is totally fine. But either way, for the game you're about to see, we were set up just like this. Game 2 against the robots, my friends, on the play, and our hand is a little bit land-heavy for my tastes, but I do like it. I do like Dark Confidant here on the play specifically. It's really nice, especially when we've got interaction to back him up, and we've got Fatal Push. Field of Ruin is basically a kill spell for the manlands, and of course EE is a really nice catch-up card, and with big X for 1 potential here, so once more, I'm going to run out the Catacombs instead of the Marsh here because this time I kind of want to thin the deck out a little bit. So I'm either going to get a Tomb if I don't need to push, or I'm going to get a Swamp if I want to push. Opponent goes Citadel, Springleaf Drum, Mox Opal, Signal Pest. Mox Opal again, cashing in their already used Opal. And then tapping low for an Arcbound Ravager, tapping out. So that's quite the turn 1 play from our opponent. Very impressive, and certainly want to push this Arcbound Ravager before it gets out of control, especially because we have the desire to play Dark Confidant on turn 2 here. The other consideration is just trying to get really greedy and set up a long-term, really high blowout potential engineered explosives, but we can't really afford to do that with Ravager in this situation, in my opinion. We just take the relatively clean kill when we can get it, and then we do what we always plan to do in this with this hand, which is play the turn 2 Dark Confidant and pass back. Signal Pest, battle cry to no allies, battle cry to an empty board, just hitting us for 1. You got us. And they just pass after having deployed an Inkmoth Nexus, so Arcbound Ravager appears to have been their big payoff. Bob is going to show us a land. We've got another land for turn, so we are officially flooded, and even though it would be nice to run out the Manland, or maybe to run out the Marsh before it's going to ETB tapped, I think we have to play the Field of Ruin there. We have to hit that Inkmoth Nexus early, especially because we've got another field coming down the pipeline, so right now we'll get in for 2 with our Bob. The race is on. The big heavy hitters on both sides of the table here. And then I don't think we want to preemptively run out the engineered explosives here. They are relatively well spread out around the 1s, the 0s, and the 2s. We don't know where we need it, so I think here we definitely just want to pass with it. And the opponent's going to fire up the Inkmoth Nexus. I thought about doing it in response, but then I said, sure, we'll let them go to combat, we'll let them tap out to attack, and then we're going to field them. Although there are some scenarios, some board states in which you will want to hit it before it becomes an artifact creature, for instance, against Welding Jar, right? But that's not the case here, so we can afford to let them tap out and then hit them with the field. We'll go get a forest. Doesn't bluff anything. And note that the opponent did not go to get a land. Very interesting. So either they have a basic already in their hand, or they chose not to fetch it for some reason, or they misclicked, or who knows. But either way, Affinity usually plays 1 or 2 basic lands. I don't expect them to play literally none. But either way, we just kind of destroyed them there with no basic fetched as a consolation prize. So Bob is continuing to find us some painless flips, and we got a little gas off our draw step with that trophy. So even though we're very, very flooded, that's honestly fine with me. We're still painless, and the Bob is keeping us in, it's erasing the Signal Pest pretty well. So we play out the Quagmire, no need for that second Field of Ruin quite yet, and we're holding up trophy, and we still hold on to that EE for the same reasons I've been mentioning. I don't think we want to push the panic button quite yet and trophy away this 1-2. It's just not accomplishing that much. They've got their 3rd Darksteel Citadel, and they'll pass back to us, so not much for us to do here. I don't think we want to trophy away anything. Okay, Bob flips a Maelstrom Pulse that is painful, and we also drew Abrupt Decay for turn. So now we've got a fistful of removal, so now we can just kind of be really cavalier with our removal. We know we are so far ahead on resources now, and when we have been for the whole game, right? But we don't want to just cast our removal spells, our only targeted removal spell, that is, without having backups in hand. So now we can attack with the Bob, and we can start being a little bit more aggressive with casting removal. So Blooming Marsh pass back. Opponent's got the Mountain, so yeah, it seems like that Mountain is their only basic, and it seems like it was in their hand. They've got Cranial Plating. Okay, well, there's a payoff card for them. So, with 1 Unknown still in hand, they're attacking with the Pest, which is now an 8-2. So what I'm going to do here is go ahead and decay the Pest itself, because even if they didn't have a payoff of Cranial Plating, again, we've got all the removal we need this turn. I was going to decay the Pest anyway, because we've got all kinds of other removal, so we might as well do it there, just to save that 1 point of damage. See what the opponent does. They've got nothing, they're going to pass, so end step, yeah, we'll just be mana efficient, we'll trophy away that Cranial Plating. Their last card in hand is Spell Pierce, so that makes sense as far as something that was sitting in their hand besides a land. So they get to protect the plating, or so they think. However, we do still have the Pulse around, and I think that is certainly what we want to do. But we'll sequence correctly. We're going to go Tracker into land, into Pulse. Not fetching just because we're so far ahead on our resources. We don't even need to take that 1 point of damage, basically. But we'll hit them for 2 with Bob, and we'll pass. They've got an Ornithopter off the top. Still empty-handed, and they will pass. Alright, Bob flips Inquisition. So let's start off by cracking a clue. And we draw Fulminator Mage. Alright, so now I think the fetch land is fine there. We're really looking for a little bit more action, and Liliana the Last Hope is an interesting one. So we'll go ahead and attack, see if they are frightened into taking any blocks yet, and they don't. And they don't. So here, I don't think there's much that can really kill me. So I'm going to go ahead, if I do this, I'm going to go ahead and play out the Liliana the Last Hope and shrink the Ornithopter. So they have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 artifacts. So even if they top deck a Cranial Plating, their Ornithopter is still only hitting me for 4. And yeah, I guess if I flip like a Damnation off of Bob, sure. But definitely seems pretty safe to do it this way. And if I wanted to be absolutely certain that I wouldn't die, I would have played Engineered Explosives there on 0 and cracked it to kill the Ornithopter and the Mox Opal, but I actually don't want them to know about the EE, so that's why I took the line that I did. And they're just going to pass, so Welding Jar was their play for turn, sure. We've got the trophy, we're going to trophy the Thopter main phase, and they're just dead to that, because even if they regen it with Welding Jar, it gets tapped, and they're dead on board. So, that was a really fun game, because we were just uncontested, rolling with the Bob, attacking freely with him on top of just drawing card after card after card. However, it was still a little bit, like, tense, because we were flooded pretty hard, and we were a little bit, we just kind of found the interaction that we needed as they found the gas. If they had had a stronger progression, we might have had to take more desperate measures, and it might have been a more interesting game. So, despite our overwhelming dominance, it was still, on some axes, it was still a little bit hairy on other axes, more so than one would expect. Given the progression of each respective board, right? But regardless, it was a really fun game because, like I said, we just got to get card after card with a freely swinging Bob. Always feels good. And in the end, we did get there pretty comfortably, and we did have the EE for an emergency button if we needed to press that, but we successfully won the game without exposing the EE, which is cool because they don't know about it, but it's going to be a little tougher for us, perhaps, Game 3 on the draw, so let's take a look at that. Alright, my friends, Game 3 against Robots, the opponent's going to take a mulligan, and as good as Kalidas is, I don't think Kalidas plus no interaction on the draw is likely to get us there against an Affinity deck, so we're going to mulligan, the opponent's going to stay at 6, and we certainly will too. This hand is absolutely glorious as a curve. Inquisition into Brutality, into Lily the Last Hope is so good against Affinity. Big problem is these ETB tapped lands are looking a little bit clunky, right? But we've got Fatal Push on top. Oh, man. So, powerful progression here on our side, potentially. But we hope they're not so fast that they run us over and our ETB tapped lands stop us from competing. So, opponent's got Blink Moth, Welding Jar, Ornithopter, Vault Scourge. We drew that Fatal Push that we knew about. And as good as the push is, I think now is the time where we need to Inquisition. And we see, well, it's a very Inquisition-proof hand because it's double Cranial Plating. So we were really hoping they had, like, a land and a payoff card. We take the payoff card, and then we can manage the board. They got double Cranial Plating. That is bad news. Bad news. So, however, the good news is they cannot cast the plating this turn. Unless they draw land, and they don't. They draw a Springleaf Drum. So that's going to let them cast it next turn, but for now, all they can do is hit us with this 1/1 lifelinker to make it 19 all. You got it. We'll untap, we'll draw another Liliana the Last Hope. Well, I won't really complain about seeing one of my very best cards there in multiples, but it doesn't make our hand any less clunky, that is for sure. So we play a Quagmire and we pass, holding up Fatal Push. They're tapping out for that plating, sure. And we're going to go ahead and try to Fatal Push this Vault Scourge. And they're going to let it resolve. They didn't crack the Welding Jar. That is interesting. It makes me wonder what their final card in hand is. Unfortunately, I shouldn't say unfortunately, really, because this is actually probably what we would have done anyway. I was going to say, unfortunately, we don't have the third land untapped, but this is actually really clean right here. Collective Brutality to kill the Ornithopter means they cannot protect it with the Welding Jar, and they actually do not have any creatures on board besides this manland, and also no way to use anything to accelerate the Springleaf Drum in a coherent manner. So Brutality killing the Ornithopter there is actually awesome for us. It lets us play our Quagmire with no problems there as well. And Assassin's Trophy in hand is definitely not bad either. The opponent's going to untap, take their draw, and pass back to us. We draw Field of Ruin, which is pretty sweet, but Liliana the Last Hope, go ahead and tick her up. Increase her loyalty, I think, is the play here. Alright, nothing from the opponent. They're going to draw. And they have to pass yet again. Well, that's awesome for us, my friends. And we draw another Field of Ruin, which is actually just fine. So here, I'm pretty happy to main phase try to field this Blinkmoth Nexus. If they want to animate it and then spend the Welding Jar, I have enough lands where I actually don't care about that at all. So they just allow it to resolve, which is interesting. Not what I expected, but I'll take it. They go get that mountain, sure, but now they have no creatures of any kind. We've got a Last Hope on 5. We've got a backup Last Hope in hand. We've got a trophy in hand. So they find Ornithopter. All right, that is a creature. And now they get to tap out for another Cranial Plating. Very, very interesting. And that's actually one of the few things that lines up really well against what we're doing. Because if they had another creature, we could maybe kill it with a Last Hope. If they've got just one plating as the big payoff, we can always trophy away the plating. So either way, I think we're supposed to trophy here on the end step. We're going to go for that Ornithopter, and they do cash in the Welding Jar now to protect it, sure. So wanted to be mana efficient there, and let's see if we can draw some more interaction. Well, kind of. Inquisition, it's definitely, there are windows in which it would be a dead draw here, and it's not. So let's see what they've got. They've got Vault Scourge, and they've got Dispatch, which is basically a no-downside path to exile, as long as they've got Metalcraft active, excuse me. So I went ahead and took that Dispatch, because they can't play the Vault Scourge right now, not until Liliana the Last Hope, and right now we are just simply animating the Hissing Quagmire after we tick up the Liliana, and we're going to get in for 2. There's no real point in holding up Field of Ruin there, in my opinion. They play the Vault Scourge, so they run her out. They run it out into the known Lily, and then they equip the plating. Sure. Fine with us. We can start racing them potentially, and they don't know we have the backup Liliana in hand, which is really nice. So we kill the Scourge, and we play out Scavenging Ooze, which is definitely better than firing up a manland in this situation. And we'll pass. Opponent finds Spire of Industry, which is, and then Vault Scourge is another draw. It's actually a pretty good draw for them. That means they get to equip this other Cranial Plating here, and also have mana to do other things potentially that they can find off the top of the deck. So all of a sudden, again, like I repeat, the third Cranial Plating, the second one on board, is actually really tough for us to handle. So they go ahead and take away the Liliana, which is wonderful for us. We're very happy we have the second one in hand, especially because she just basically gained us 10 life there after doing so much other work as well. So Scooz is going to get greedy on the end step, gobble up 3 things, and we find Kalidas. Okay, it's a good one. It's a good one, don't get me wrong, but here we definitely have to play out the Liliana, so we might as well be very mana efficient and set them back on mana first while before deploying our Liliana. So we Stone Rain that Spire of Industry, we tick up, we kill the Scourge, and we are attacking for 5, so we're racing them pretty effectively. Also doing, taking care of the Scourge is shrinking this Ornithopter. Ornithopter swinging for 8 and taking care of our Lily the Last Hope. So Liliana the Last Hope, gaining us a lot of life, doing a lot of work. They have another Spire of Industry, sure. Okay. Not drawing interaction there is a little bit rough. It's a little bit rough, I'm not going to lie. So we're just going to tap out, just about tap out for the Kalidas. Use our final mana to gain a life. Hit in with the Scooz, and, I say it's a little bit rough, and it is in a way, because we have so much of it in the deck. We have so many live draws, they'd be pretty crippled if we just killed this Ornithopter in some way, shape, or form. However, we are still in a really good position, because they're at 3, and we're at 23. And we have lethal on board a couple different ways. So let's see what the opponent has. Well, it's going to be nothing that's going to save them, so they go ahead and scoop it up. And, yeah, that was an interesting game. With our curve being Inquisition into Collective Brutality into Liliana the Last Hope, had we hit our untapped lands, which we didn't, so it ended up being into Trophy, into Last Hope. Anyway, it looked like the type of hand that was very favored, but could in theory have lost to a fast nut draw from the Affinity player. And as it turns out, they didn't have the nut draw, but it also, my curve didn't just totally, cleanly, like, dominate the game like it looked like it would, right? They had that, seeing 3 cranial platings and us not being able to efficiently answer the second and the third, that's actually what really made the game more interesting than it looked like it was going to be. It looked like it was going to be, well, you better not draw me or you're not going to beat this at all. And granted, by the end of it, we were very far ahead, but they were just kind of one good draw step in those turns away from really putting the pressure on us and potentially even getting us. So, just goes to show you how much you have to respect a deck like Affinity, but in any case, Liliana the Last Hope putting in an absolute shift. Our Inquisitions were pretty good here. The removal, the interaction on the board that we did see was pretty good, and Skoos and Kalitas to kind of bring things home were very nice as well. So, great games, opponent, well played, and we advance, my friends, to 3-0 in the league. I hope you're having fun watching this, and I will see you for round 4. Okay, here we are on the draw for round 4, and we've got a balanced one, my friends. We've got Painless Mana, turn 1 Thoughtseize. We can interact with the board pretty well, turn 2 Tarmogoyf. I like a lot about this hand, and I'm going to keep it for sure. The opponent likes 7 as well. It is Island Pass. Well, this could be a million different things. Let's find out what it is with the Thoughtseize. Opponent will Thought Scour themselves in response, milling Mana, Morphos, and Lightning Bolt. Well, I think we know what this is. This is the king of the format right now, Izzet Phoenix. So we see Surgical Extraction, card we don't care about. Mana Morphos, almost always a valid take with a discard spell. Opt is whatever, and Pyromancer Ascension, this is a card that can really beat us, very, very good value against us, a win condition in its own right. On top of that, it's a way to grow the Tarmogoyf even bigger than it already will be, so I think that is the clear take. Opponent just plays a Steam Vents and passes, and I think it is Tarmogoyf time. Goyf will resolve, opponent will opt and pass back to us. Opponent plays an island and they found another Pyromancer's Ascension, so that's really brutal, guys. That is definitely the last thing we wanted to see. It makes our earlier correct take with Thoughtseize of their first Ascension worse. Like if we had just taken Mana Morphos, then their hand would be really clunky right now with double Ascension and not enough fuel for it. So it's kind of a... that was just like the best draw they could find. Now, we have a couple choices here. We can play it really safe and we can just trophy away the Ascension right now. And but here's the problem with that. It ramps them. It doesn't grow the Tarmogoyf. It's not mana efficient on our end. Whereas we really want to be mana efficient, right? This turn, because maybe we want to get the trackers going next turn if we draw a land. So, that would be the safe play, but I think the statistically better play on average here is to try this Liliana of the Veil. She resolves. Let's tick her up. Pretty happy to pitch a tracker here. We want to keep the Fatal Push around for Drake and for Thing, so tracker pitch is fine here, and that will grow the Goyf as well. So in many, many ways, I think the Liliana play there is better. We hit in for 4, and the opponent will think about what to do, tap, untap, and then get a counter on the Ascension with that Mana Morphos. Then they have another Opt. So, yeah, that sucks for us. They've got the 2 counters on Ascension, and they were at, what, 47 cards at the beginning of this turn? So at the beginning of this turn, 47 cards in their library. We're at 18 life. Let's hit play. They've got the Monomorphos they get to copy. So the Monomorphos is really what's busted here because it just copies itself. Now it's a ramp spell that draws 2. It's just insane. And, you know, they just had it. They just have everything here to just go off. And they've got now Faithless Looting, which is the card selection that they need. They dump a couple Phoenixes into the yard. They're going to bolt us as well, so they get to copy the bolt for free. Oh, look at that. They get to copy the bolt for free again. And look at that. The Phoenixes come back and deal exactly lethal to us. So look at their library now, 24 cards. So turn 4, after having been Thought Seized on turn 1 and Liliana'd on turn 3, with their board totally empty besides Pyromancer Ascension with no counters on it, and with no value in their graveyard yet, the opponent untaps and sees 23 cards in one turn and deals 18 damage to us, all while increasing the number of cards in their hand and presenting recursive threats onto the board in multiples. So that, my friends, is why people are talking about a ban for this deck. I'm not just saying that because I just lost here. It's just the sheer consistency of it is one aspect of it, and the sheer power of it is another aspect. And it's kind of a never the twain shall meet moment as far as Modern balance is concerned. It seems like you can be a super consistent deck, but you shouldn't be able to see 23 cards and deal 18 damage through a bunch of disruption on turn 4. Or you should be able to do that, but not have anywhere near the consistency that the deck does. Now, this is the popular opinion. I'm not somebody who likes to indulge in ban mania, and to be fair, this was an extreme outlier. And to be even more fair, I had the out, right? I had the out. I could have played it super safe and trophied away the Ascension on my turn before I passed it back. However, like I explained at the time, I genuinely think it was correct to play the Liliana there. It's so much better in so many ways to play the Liliana. It still runs them out of resources. It advances our clock with Tarmogoyf. It's mana efficient. It doesn't ramp them. All those things are true. They just happen to have the Monomorphose and then the Opt in hand, and then another Monomorphose immediately. So they immediately had the things they needed to get the double counter on Ascension, and then they immediately had the best card to start really making that Ascension go to work for them. So you guys let me know what you think. Obviously, in hindsight, it looks like I should have trophied. And the way the game played out, of course, I should have trophied given their exact hand, which I didn't have the knowledge of. I did know about the Monomorphose, but nothing more. However, I stand by my decision. I think on average it is better to play the Liliana there, but boy oh boy did we get punished for doing so. So you'll have to let me know what you guys think about all that, but regardless, let us take a look at the sideboard. Alright, my friends, so sideboarding against Izzet Phoenix, I've heard some people argue that one of the reasons Phoenix is so successful is because people don't know how to sideboard against them. I can see that being true to some degree, because it is a little bit unclear what exactly is the best and what exactly is not. I think it's there's some very fine margins to be found within sideboarding decisions here. And I don't think the argument that people are making along those lines necessarily applies to us. I think it's more for decks that are like slamming in a bunch of rest in pieces and assuming that's going to stop the Phoenix deck from doing anything. That doesn't really apply to us. I think our sideboarding is definitely value-oriented first and foremost, just like our regular Plan A is, and that actually lines up better against Phoenix than trying to treat Phoenix like a combo deck. So as far as that's concerned, I agree with that line of argumentation. But what do we do here? What do we do? Well, I think we want Extraction for Phoenixes, because we do usually lose to the card Phoenix more than we lose to Drake or Thing by far. I like Grafdigger's Cage as well for the same reason, and that also shuts off Faithless Looting. And Nile Spellbomb is also great because, you know, if this was just 4 rest in pieces, I think that would be bad. We wouldn't want all 4, but we have a couple things that are more specifically geared toward Phoenix, and then some things that are just also hit Phoenix, but can hit other graveyard mechanics while also keeping us competitive on the value axis, which we need to remain competitive there too. So for that reason, this is one of the reasons I like the diversity of Grave Hate pieces in the sideboard, and I think they all should come in here, even though that's not the only thing we have to worry about. Otherwise, what else do we like? Well, honestly, probably not all that much from over here. Maelstrom Pulse, as always, is one that I'm pretty interested in, but otherwise, it's not really a Fulminator Mage matchup. The Planeswalkers here are not the most exciting. I think Damnation and Collective Brutality are both pretty playable here. Some people don't like Brutality as much, and Damnation is definitely awkward in some windows, because a lot of the times we're the ones with the turn 2 proactive threat, and of course the Phoenixes have haste, which Damnation lines up very poorly against on multiple levels. So those are the two I'm not as sure about. You guys let me know what you think, but I think these 5 for sure are great. And let's figure out what comes out. So Thoughtseize and Dark Confidant are definitely both questionable because we can't leverage our life total that much, so I think at least 2 Thoughtseizes for sure come out, and at least 2 Dark Confidants for sure come out. We can consider cutting the remainder of those as well, so we'll put those over there. Otherwise, Liliana the Last Hope is not accomplishing very much in this matchup, and then we just kind of have, like, Tireless Tracker is just kind of clearly our worst threat. All of our remaining 2-drops are good, and Tracker is just a little slow. So we could consider cutting, like, a couple Trackers, maybe. So what does that make us want to do? Well, what do we think about these 2 remaining cards, Damnation and Collective Brutality? I don't know. I think I like Collective Brutality, so let's go ahead and say Brutality is good, and on the play, we don't really want this Thoughtseize. It's a very kind of reactive card in a weird way. It's not the right word. It is a proactive card, but I think Thoughtseize is a little bit more necessary if we're going to play this one Thoughtseize on the draw than it is on the play, because we're already on the back foot, right? And even though Dark Confidant's very poor against Gutshot, maybe we try to leverage 2 on the play, and then if we're on the draw, we go down to just 1. So this is a fine 60 if you want the Damnation, maybe just 3 Tracker is too clunky anyway. So if we say we want the Damnation, it could look like this on the play. Then on the draw, we could cut a Dark Confidant away, maybe bring back a Thoughtseize, and I think that would be viable as well. Again, open question about Damnation in my opinion. Open question maybe about even this one Dark Confidant, and how good Collective Brutality is and all that. But I think if nothing else, this is a reasonable approximation of where you want to be, and for the game on the play that you're about to see, my deck looked just like this. Okay, my friends, game 2 against Izzet Phoenix, and we'll keep this hand. It's obviously just mono threats, but I think the being on the play, this is a viable keep because Scavenging Ooze can do a lot of work in terms of keeping their early plays down, and we've got a lot of gas to draw off the top. Tarmogoyf is also very, very good in the matchup in general, but given the lack of a graveyard right now, I think Scooz is the play. So they're going to mill over a couple basics with their Thought Scour, and then they'll take their turn. Mountain. Pyromancer Ascension. Well, turn 2 Ascension's a little frightening, but at least we have the Ooze to keep that down, right? So Verdant Catacombs is our draw. Not the most exciting draw, but, it's at least letting us kind of do some things. We'll eat the Thought Scour, we'll attack for 2, we play a Tarmogoyf, and we'll pass. We do have Surgical Extraction in hand. That is a nice safety valve in this situation. Very nice safety valve. And opponent will kick things off with a Monomorphos. It is potentially a little bit scary to have gone down, shields down with that Ooze, but I think it is kind of like in game 1. I think it's correct to be proactive, to deploy a threat, and if they have the absolute nut draw, well, they have the absolute nut draw. But they go Monomorphos into Looting, pitching a Phoenix, and another Pyromancer's Ascension. Then they go Thought Scour, milling Thing, and Scalding Tarn. Then they're going to bolt the Scooz, so, it's a heck of a turn, but they have not gone absolutely berserk with the Ascension. They don't even have a counter on it. So great turn for them, but as they move to beginning of combat, we will go ahead and Make our client lag. My deepest apologies, my friends. I'm sorry you don't get to see the end of Game 2. The surgical extraction wrecked the replay function here. Not only did it make the client lag and then make the window crash that I was viewing the game in, now I can no longer even go back to that game. So I was going to just go back and click forward to where I left off and show you the rest and just edit the part out where things malfunction, but now it won't even let me open it, so sorry about that anticlimactic Game 2, guys, but as you can see, we're here for Game 3, so we won in Game 2, so we basically extracted the Phoenixes, and they didn't have too much else going on. I think we drew a land, and we just played Tracker into land, and we just got there. Wasn't that interesting of a game, to be honest. They kind of went all in on the Pyromancer's Ascension and the Phoenixes, and they never really got going with either. So our Tarmogoyf was able to close out the game in a hurry, and of course we saw the deck with Extraction as well, so we know how to sideboard against them, and we know what to expect here in Game 3. It was pretty standard stuff, right? It wasn't anything too off-the-wall spicy like we see out of these Phoenix decks sometimes. So once again, sorry about that, my friends. This is the perils of leaning on the replay function, but we love it anyway, right? You love it, warts and all. So, here in Game 3, after winning Game 2, the opponent keeps 7, and they go Canal into Serum Visions. And our hand, by the way, is great. We have Spellbomb and Extraction, and 3 lands, and a removal spell, and a Tireless Tracker. It's a nice balanced hand, and we draw Tarmogoyf as well, so lots to like about this hand, lots to like. Okay, opponent will fetch and they will play a turn 2 Thing in the Ice. You got it. That's kind of one thing that we're a little bit soft to. Maybe if they flip it this upcoming turn, that would be very bad, because we do not have a cheap removal spell. And respecting the likelihood of that, I don't see a great deal of point in playing out the Tarmogoyf there, and I chose to run out the Spellbomb instead. It's just a good window to resolve that Spellbomb, basically. And we'll see how things go this turn. So they begin with a Serum Visions. Then they have an Opt to follow it up, so the thing is ticking down, ticking down. They play a Mountain, and it looks like that's it. So there was an interesting consideration to Spellbomb there, but I don't think we need to quite yet, although it is a decent amount of value to get out of the yard. I don't think we're at that stage yet. I think, especially because they only show us a red mana, so we know we're not going to get blown out by a Spell Pierce here. We just play the Liliana of the Veil. We tick down, we Edict the Thing, and they will Bolt Lily in response, and that is so fine with me. We answer the thing that we were frightened of with our progression, and we 2-for-1 them while doing so. Seems fine to me. So they've got Scalding Tarn, and they will fetch. And they will play a Crackling Drake. Well, that's always a good one against us. However, it's only a 4-4 right now, so not the absolute scariest, and we draw a land for turn. So couple options here. Of course, we could go Tracker into land, but that's a little bit awkward. I might have done it, though, if it was anything but a forest. Like if it was a fetch land or even just a swamp or maybe not a man land, but an untapped black source so we could hold up Spellbomb. That would be cool. But instead, I think we just have to play at least one Tarmogoyf. And here it's a question as to whether we play the other one or whether we hold up Spellbomb activation and a painless surgical extraction, and I think I'm planning to cash in the Spellbomb this turn no matter what, so I think I will indeed just run out the Lone Goyf. Opponent's got another Thing in the Ice, and they're going to hit us for 4, so you got it. No blocks, and before damage, they're going to take some actions here. They're going to Monomorphose, our favorite card, Monomorphose. So, Monomorphose making a couple mana. There's another Monomorphose again. Growing the Crackling Drake, taking the Thing down. And then they've got Lightning Bolt for us. Sure. So, all of a sudden the Crackling Drake hits us for 7, and we're down to 9. Well, this is what this deck does. It's pretty rough. And, in my opinion, maybe a little bit loose to do all that in the declare blockers phase, because what if they had found some more sorcery speed stuff, or some more reactive stuff, you know, they could have ended up wasting more mana than they did with the Monomorphoses, so who knows? Who knows? I don't play the deck, so maybe that's not that much of a concern, but just an observation. But end step, we're going to crack the Spellbomb and draw Liliana of the Veil. Now, I would like to point out that I should have cracked the Spellbomb during Declare Blockers, now that I'm looking at it, in case I drew Fatal Push. That would have been nice, but we didn't have it anyway, so it ended up not being relevant. And we draw Liliana of the Veil, which is a good one, and then Verdant Catacombs, not so much. Now, this is a little bit awkward here, my friends, because we absolutely have to cast at least one of these removal spells, and unfortunately we can only cast one of them. If this was something else that cost a little bit less, or if we had been on turn 6 for 6 mana right now, we could have the perfect double spell turn, but as things are, we have to pulse, because we have to kill this Crackling Drake. We are dead to so many things if we do not kill the Drake. So I think we have to kill the Drake here, and we know the thing is probably going to transform next turn, but at least we're not straight up dead to the thing, right? Until we are, because they have yet another lightning bolt, so they bolt our face. And, you know, I still think that was the right play, because we made them have bolt, you know? We would have been dead to just like a couple cantrips with that Crackling Drake, right? And this is a misplay from the opponent as well, because they bolt us and flip the thing just right then and there for no reason, which allows us to play a Tarmogoyf in chump block. And if we don't die this turn, well, maybe our Liliana can get us back in this game, right? So definitely a little bit loose there from our opponent, I must say. There is absolutely no reason to just bolt us in a response there. It gave us an out just by chumping here, and that's indeed what we're going to do. Feels bad to chump block with a 5/6, but that's where we're at. The opponent has yet another Crackling Drake, so they have just been on a very high density of these very powerful threats, and we draw Skoos. So that's a bit rough. All we can do here is run out the Liliana, edict them, and hope they choose to sack the Drake. Opponent makes the right decision. They sack Thing in the Ice, so we are just dead. We'll just bluff and make sure they remember where the Declare Attacker button is, and yep, they got us. So I feel we were unlucky here in Game 3 for sure. We had a strong hand, and the opponent was just, again, they just had a really high density of these hard-hitting, hard-to-answer threats relative to how many are in their deck. Like, we had the Phoenixes covered with the Surgical Extraction, and furthermore, Phoenixes are usually the card that actually beats us. If they're on, like, a Thing in the Ice, Crackling Drake progression, we usually line up so well against that, but the opponent here had, you know, they just had a lot of burn, basically. These lightning bolts and Monomorphosis to find the lightning bolts, which not only burned us to the face, but also grew the Drakes. Yeah, that was what was really, really rough for us. It was a turn 7 kill, so it's not the fastest you'll ever see, but considering the amount of disruption we had, it did end up being a pretty fast kill, and man, feels bad. This matchup is winnable, it is favorable for us. The dominance of Phoenix is one reason it's a good idea to play Golgari right now, but it's dominant for a reason. Even the matchups that it's a little bit weak against, it can definitely steal them, and that happened to us here. So I think we took the right lines here in Game 3. I think we did in Game 2 as well, and honestly, even though it didn't work out in Game 1, I still stand by the decision to run out the Liliana on my turn 3 instead of trophying away their second copy of Ascension. But I could be wrong, my friends. I could be wrong. I've been wrong before. I will be wrong again. So you let me know, please, specifically about this matchup, what your thoughts are. Unfortunately, the Phoenix deck has stolen our dream, no 5-0 for us, but we've cashed the league already, and we are playing for the 4-1, so I will see you for round 5. Okay, my friends, fifth and final round of this competitive league. It's been a fun one. It's been a grindy one. Lots of really back and forth games. I think they've all gone to game 3. So, hard fought battles all around. Our opponent likes their 7, and so do we. It's slow being on the draw, but we've got a lot of power. Hopefully, Collective Brutality is going to do whatever we need it to do. And wouldn't you know it, it is Tron with turn 1 tower into turn 1 expedition map. One of the few matches where Collective Brutality, especially on the draw, is just kind of a non-factor. So, another land for turn is not what we wanted to see, especially one that's not named Field of Ruin. So, fortunately, opponent just has Sanctum of Ugin and not a second Urza's land, and they will pass back to us. Thoughtseizes is a good draw, better late than never, and we will certainly fire it off here. No question about that. But it's looking grim. The stuff like Tracker and Last Hope and Collective Brutality not lining up the best in this particular matchup. So we see a hand of double Sylvan Scrying, which is, to be fair, uncastable right now, and Chromatic Sphere, which they can make the green mana with. They can play Karn Liberated and Oblivion Stone. They can play next turn, just hitting a natural land drop. Karn Liberated, of course, they need Tron to hit. So what do we take here? Well, we know they're cracking the map on the end step here for sure. So the O-Stone is something that can naturally be played as well. That's something to worry about. But I would say that between the O-Stone, the Sphere and the Scryings and the map, I think they're going to get to Tron, and I think O-Stone is a little bit more beatable than Karn in this particular situation if our top deck complies. So basically we're taking away the best payoff card there. End step, they'll go get a power plant. And then sure enough, they're going to tap out for the O-Stone. So that is kind of what we wanted them to do in a way. We don't want them to... We want to make them spend the next turn getting Tron, and hopefully we can answer the O-Stone and then take it from there. But either way, I think just playing the Tracker out on curve is our best bet, and it ends up being a little bit irrelevant because they actually just draw the Urza's Mine. They do not need to spend any resources assembling Tron, and they're tapping a whole lot of mana for Walking Ballista on 4, sacking the Sanctum of Ugin to tutor up a Wormcoil Engine. They ping our Tracker to death, and we draw land. That's it, we're just dead. We can Brutality the Walking Ballista, but then where are we at? We have lands and a very, very not useful Lily the Last Hope in hand against the Wormcoil Engine. They can go, and the O-Stone's still uncracked. They can play Sphere, make green for Scrying, and play the Engine all next turn if they have another land drop in hand. Yeah, we're just done. We're just done for. So, absolutely wrecked here by Tron in game 1, but that'll happen. We had a hand that definitely did not line up well against Tron, what Tron is up to, and they had a really solid progression. It wasn't a nut draw. They didn't have turn 3 Tron, but they were very redundant, and then they naturally drew into Tron, so we just kind of got Troned on. We got Troned on, my friends, but that is okay, because things get better when we take a look at our sideboard. Okay, ladies and gentlemen, our plan against Tron is pretty straightforward. Fulminator Mage, absolutely amazing in its own right, gets even better when you pair a Surgical Extraction with it, so those cards for sure come in. Our good old reliable Maelstrom Pulse comes in so many matchups, and this is no exception. We'll bring in the Pulse as well. Final Slot is one that a lot of people are a little bit perplexed by, but Nissa Vital Force is basically a 5/5 haste most of the time, which is surprisingly decent against Tron. We need to clock them as fast as humanly possible, and also this is a good way to pressure Planeswalkers, and or just to resolve a threat like after an Oblivion Stone, for instance, that's really proactive. So Nissa, not the best, but certainly comes in. And what don't we like? Well, here we're going to board out all Fatal Pushes. It just doesn't do enough, even though it has a couple applications here. Does not do enough. Liliana the Last Hope is also very underwhelming, and the remaining underwhelming cards are Scavenging Ooze and Collective Brutality. So what I've been doing lately is when I'm on the play, I will leave in Brutality, because turn 2, if you've got turn 1 targeted discard, you see a Sylvan Scrying in their hand, then sometimes turn 2 Collective Brutality to take the Scrying is a decent play. So, and plus, like, exactly one brutality, you know, for the life drain and whatever else, it's never really all that bad. So, on the play, I leave that brutality in, mainly to try to poach a turn 2 scrying if I don't have a turn 2 threat to play. And we'll take out a Scooze. If there's a game 3 and I'm on the draw, the Scooze comes back in, and the brutality comes out, because a Grizzly Bear is probably better, right? So, in any case, that is how we sideboard against Tron. Here's what the deck looks like, and I will see you for game 2. Taking the play here, game 2 against Tron, and ooh, what a powerful but clunky hand, right? We've got Fulminator Mage, our best card, but all of our lands are entering tapped. We only have 2 of them, and we don't have any hand disruption, which is not what we want to see. However, we are leaning on the power of Fulminator Mage, and I think that alone is almost reason enough to keep a hand like this. And then when you factor in Abrupt Decay, which actually lines up decently well in the very early stages against their Mono Rocks and their Expedition maps sometimes, Trophy, which is just a great all-around card against Tron, I think this hand's a keep. It's just a little bit of a high variance keep, that's all, but I don't think we throw it back. Tower into map is a little scary, and the fact that we did not draw another land is even scarier, my friends, but at least it's a reasonable early play of Inquisition of Kozilek. So we see they have double Urza's Mine in hand, so they can have turn 3 Tron potentially assembled, with a little bit of redundancy for the mines at least. They also have a very frightening payoff of Ugin. They have a Forest for good measure. Ancient Stirrings and Chromatic Star are the 2 takes there, and I actually chose to take the Star because Stirrings is a more powerful card without question, but they're not going to want to play Forest to play the Stirrings anytime soon, and our whole plan is to disrupt Tron as much as possible, so I think taking the Star there is totally reasonable, and sure enough they go mine, and thank all that is holy, we draw an untapped land for turn 3. So that is really what this hand needed to be awesome. And now the hand's awesome, so we get to go Fulminator Mage. We want to make sure we hit the tower, most likely because they're going to have the backup mine, but there's no reason necessarily to do that right now. Let's make them tutor with the map first, right? I think that's the correct practice in this situation. So they go get the power plant, sure. Now it's time to hit the tower. Alright, opponent will play out that power plant, and they will pass. So here, again, I think I'm rewarded for taking the Star, because they could at least have played the Star this turn. But because we left the Stirrings in hand, they're going to want to play another Tron land, right? So they just don't get to really do anything with their turn. Us not drawing a land here isn't great, because we would have loved to go just Tracker into land. I still think Tracker's the play there. We just want to be mana efficient, and it is a better threat than Scooze, you know, kind of on its own. So they're going to play a Forest, and they will Stirrings for a Chromatic Sphere, not the most frightening find off of that, and they pass. Lily of the Veil, once again it's not a land, so that's a little bit bad, but Lily is actually a fantastic draw in her own right. So the Tracker is just a Balduvian Barbarians at this point, but let's see if Fulminator Mage and Liliana of the Veil can be what carries us through this game. Lily is the clear play here over, you know, trying to force the sphere to crack with any of our removal. And we'll we will pitch Abrupt Decay. I think there's an argument for pitching Scooze as well and just keeping all of our removal, but they do play some spot removal, so I think we want the other body there just in case they manage to take care of our Tracker, basically. We get an Ulamog out of their hand, okay. They begin by cracking Sphere, using it to play Star, playing another Mine. And then playing an Oblivion Stone, sure. That's a card we can handle. We have the outs, and now we're going to take up our Lily to pitch the Scooze. We'll make a land drop, we make a clue. We will pulse. We will consider pulsing away the O-Stone, and then in the end we still decide to, but it's worth noting that we're a little bit soft to them just top-decking Urza's Tower here, so I considered, you know, trophying away the power plant instead, but Oblivion Stone on 5, cracking it is absolutely backbreaking against us. That would leave us with literally nothing if we, just a Maelstrom Pulse in hand if we took that other line. So I think it's correct here to pulse away the O-Stone and try to fade them, just top decking the tower. So they crack the sphere. Sylvan Scrying. Okay, so they got the tower. That's pretty bad, but fortunately they're just 1 mana shy of that Ugin. So Ugin would just win the game for them right now, basically. Or at least put us very, very far behind. But instead, they do have another payoff in its Wormcoil engine. So they've got Ugin plus 1 unknown in hand. And they play the Wormcoil, they pass back to us. We draw Field of Ruin. Well, that's an absolutely interesting draw here, and it means we're going to be able to take them off of Tron. So for that, without spending Assassin's Trophy necessarily to do so. So for that reason, I think the line that we might otherwise take is different. If we didn't have that Field of Ruin, who knows what we would be doing here. But because we've got the field, I think we go ahead and use it. We take them off of tower, and then we're going to Edict away the Wormcoil with Liliana. Now we pass and try to fight through these Wormcoil tokens, but first we're going to see how they attack. So they're sending in only the Death Touch 1, and it is coming across at Liliana. So if they attacked with both, I'm not sure exactly what I would have done. But here I'm pretty happy to take this trade. We've got a lot of gas, and it's kind of an awkward situation to be in a more controlling role against Tron. It's never ideal, but I think if there's one card that can facilitate that role, it is Liliana of the Veil. So we're happy to take trades here to keep the board clear. They've got an Oblivion Stone. Well, that's a bit of a terrifying one. End step, we'll go ahead and crack a clue. Blooming Marsh and Blooming Marsh, well, not very exciting, my friends. So let's try to dig for yet more action with another clue. And we have Thoughtseize. Alright, so that's actually action I'm pretty excited about. So we'll lead on the Thoughtseize to inform our Liliana decision. And we see Ugin and Karn. Well, those are some pretty good ones. But we take one with the Thoughtseize, we take the other. We take Liliana up to take the other. I think that is abundantly clear. And then we'll go ahead and trophy away that Oblivion Stone and see if we can beat this life-leaking Wormcoil engine token. And play out that Blooming Marsh and pass. So we are empty-handed. The opponent's got... Alright, my friends, we're back after a replay glitch, just hitting play, seeing if it works its way through it this time. Opponent's got a Stirrings for a power plant, is the best they can do. So they get to go ahead and hit our Liliana. We'll use our Surgical to take care of Karn. So that empties our hand, then we get to tick the Lily up, and then crack a clue and find not much. But here we have a Hissing Quagmire that trades well. And I guess the replay is good enough where we can slow it back down again. So our Hissing Quagmire trades away with their Wormcoil lifelink token to keep our Liliana alive. Very, very sweet. Opponent top decks an Oblivion Stone. Unfortunately for them, they're just a tad shy of cracking it. So it's back to us. So we'll fire up the Treetop Village, hit them for 3. They have stabilized their life total pretty well. So this is a really crazy game, which is why I had to make sure the replay wasn't too bad here. And then we're just going to pass. There's no point ticking Liliana up to ditch the Bob. They're empty-handed. There's no point in playing the Bob, so it dies to the Oblivion Stone. So they put a Fate counter on the Forest, which is pretty cool. I have to give them props for that. And it is going to go back to us. Fair enough. Okay, Liliana of the Veil is our draw, but on our draw step, they are going to crack the O-Stone, which actually plays perfectly into our hands, to be honest. Because we just get to redeploy another Liliana, empty our hand entirely, and tick up to get the Ugin out of their hands. So my goodness, friends, that worked out pretty well for us. Pretty darn well, I must say. Here we are on turn 11, The opponent's still at 17 life, so it's a little bit of a terrifying position to be in against Tron. But they they draw a Chromatic Star, they crack it, and they just scoop. So, absolutely crazy game. In the mid-game, we ended up having to take, like, a controlling defensive posture, which is not recommended against Tron. They just top-deck bomb after bomb sometimes, and you just can't beat them. That's why the clock is so important. But this was one of those unusual games where we actually were able to pivot to a controlling role and actually win. And that is largely due to the power of Liliana of the Veil, who's one of the few things that can really, keep them out of resources while also battling through things like Worm Coil Engine, right? So, honorable display there from the deck, from Liliana of the Veil. Fulminator Mage early was really nice to set them back, but then we just had a little bit of everything. It was a very, very unorthodox game, and to be fair, I'm a little bit surprised that the opponent did scoop as soon as they did, because we're not anywhere near to killing them, and they can still top deck some pretty good bombs, but they've got no more Karns in the deck. They've already lost Ugin. To both Ugins, they lost Ulamog. So, they've still got Worm Coil Engines, probably Thragtusks in there. So, a little bit of an early concession if you ask me. But we will certainly take it. We earned that win. And we will move on to Game 3. Alright, my friends. Deciding game against Tron. And the opponent has mulliganed. We aren't going to. We lack the turn 1 hand disruption. But otherwise, we've got a fire hand. Field of Ruin is in here, Dark Confidant or Tarmogoyf on turn 2 as the case may be, Fulminator on turn 3, Liliana turn 4. It's looking so good, and the opponent is mulling, and they're down at 5, so Tron can still beat you on a Mulda too, always respect that, but signs are fairly promising for us. Swamp is not an exciting draw, but we'll run out the Marsh Flats, planning to grab an Overgrown Tomb here on the end step. Opponent's cracking that star, and, they've got two Urza's lands down on turn 2, and they're casting a Stirrings, and Stirrings will find map. So, it's not the nightmare scenario of them finding Power Plant off the Stirrings, but they do get to play out that map. Pretty strong stuff for them after a mull to 5, it must be said. We get that tomb, and we draw Inquisition. Well, we had a similar scenario happen earlier in this league where the Inquisition came just a little bit too late, and just like then, I think it's correct to play out our 2-drop here and be mana efficient. We're definitely going Fulminator next turn. So the earliest we could have cast our Tarmogoyf is probably turn 4, but then we would not be casting our Lily on turn 4. If we took this turn to play Inquisition, right? So I think Tarmogoyf there is correct, even though Inquisition would have been nice as well. And, they crack the map, they've got the Power Plant, and they've got a Sphere. And they're cracking the Sphere to play another Sphere. Or to play a Star, excuse me. So, they're putting together a really good progression here, considering their mulligan. We do not know whether they have a payoff in hand, but we hope that we don't even need to find out, because it's clearly just Fulminator Mage time. Destroy the land they tutored up most recently. And that grows the Goyf as well if we do it main phase, so that's why we just did that. No real reason not to. They're tapped out anyway. Back to them, they have another Urza's Tower as their play after cracking a star. And they have a Walking Ballista as a 1/1. Okay. Not the most frightening thing I've ever seen, and we draw another Inquisition, which, to be fair, is not the best thing I've ever seen from our side of the table either. But let's begin with a Tarmogoyf attack, see what they do. Probably just take it. We got them on a 5-turn clock, that's why it was really nice to tap out turn 2 for this Goyf. It's not every game where we're gonna, take it to turn 12 or whatever it was in G2 and still live to tell the tale, right? So Inquisition U, and it's a whiff. We see Double Forest Ulamog. Well, to be fair, it's nothing that they're close to casting. Even if they get Tron, they're still no, to be fair, if they top deck the Power Plant, they can cast that with the Double Tower. So that's a thing. But there's no reason to expose our Field of Ruin still quite yet. We'll just play the Liliana, and we're going to take up this other Inquisition as a free pitch, and their Ulamog is actually the one they choose to pick here rather than one of the double forests, which, is understandable, but I'm still kind of happy about that. They're going to put a counter on the old Ballista, and they're going to attack the Liliana for 2, which is totally understandable. It means if we want to edict this thing away, we need to lose her to do so. And you know what? I think we do. I think we do because, number 1, we just don't want this thing to chump block next turn. We want to end the game with Tarmogoyf. And number 2, we want to have free reign to play out our Dark Confidant. Number 1, the Confidant would get pinged by the Ballista, and it would still be around, which would be a disaster. Number 2, the fact that we have a Planeswalker in the graveyard now means the Goyf is actually a 5/6, and in conjunction with the Bob means they are actually dead on board this next turn. So for all of those reasons, even though it might have looked a little bit loose at first glance to edict with that Lily, it's actually a very, very solid play. So of course we're going to draw step, hit that Urza's Mine so they cannot rip Tron out of nowhere with a perhaps unknown payoff card in hand. And we're in a good position. So they've got Chromatic Sphere, they're going to crack it. They've got an Expedition map, okay, we don't care about that yet. They've got Forest, they've got Relic. I was just about thinking at this point that there's, shy of maybe a removal spell, there's nothing they could really have to stay alive, but Relic is going to keep them alive. So the opponent's putting together, again, some really impressive stuff, considering them all. We flip some gas with Bob, but it's kind of slow, clunky gas, but we'll still take it. We're attacking with both. They're going to crack the Relic, of course. Goyf is a 0/1, nothing we could have done this turn differently to play around that, to grow it before damage or anything that way. So they take 2, and the only play that makes sense here is Tracker into land, and we will crack it main phase, basically just in case we hit a Thoughtseize here, but it's Field of Ruin, sure. Back to the opponent. Okay, what else can you have here, opponent? Well, they're going to go spend some mana cracking the map. Okay. And they have a Walking Ballista as a 1/1. And they have another Relic, so you gotta hand it to the opponent. They're putting together a lot of really interesting stuff here. However, unfortunately for them, they cannot afford to ping the Bob because then they're just dead on board, so they have to let us untap. Well, they're not dead on board because they can shrink the Goyf as well, but if we have a land drop and a cracked Clue, they'll be dead. And they have to assume we're going to have that, I guess. Either way, we have Liliana of the Veil. It shows the game ending here, but I think we played out the Liliana first, and they scooped to that, right? But regardless, land and Liliana they scooped to. So either way, however we got there, my friends. We took down Tron to finish 4-1 in this league, and ooh, that 5-0, it was within our grasp. The Phoenix deck, we took them to 3 games, and their 2 wins, they had insane progressions in Windows, at least. They had the absolute craziness of seeing, 24 cards on one turn and doing 18 damage on turn 4 after some disruption. And in game 3, they had just the parade of, Drake into Thing that flipped into Drake. Just the big heavy hitters, plus a couple bolts to seal the deal. And, that one, if we had taken a different and perhaps even worse line in game 1, who knows, that still could have got us there. So that's the one that got away, my friends. That feels bad, but a 4-1 I will take all day. The 4-1 in general feels great, especially because we took down 2 big mana decks, probably the 2 toughest big mana decks in Valakut, Titan Shift to be exact, and Tron. We also got there in the mirror match, which of course is a 50-50 by definition, and against Affinity, which might be a little bit more favorable than the rest of them, but still no pushover. So a gauntlet of tough decks, a lot of unfavorable, a decent amount at least of unfavorable matchups here, and a lot of tier 1 stuff, and we come out with the 4-1. So that takes my record this month in competitive leagues with this list to 22-8. Very, very nice results with this specific list. Remember, we are on 4 Dark Confidant, we are on 4 Liliana of the Veil. I think I'm very happy with these decisions so far. Otherwise, it's the list you have seen me refining bit by bit over the months, and I'm very, very happy, my friends, with where this list is sitting in the current meta, and with the results I've been getting on it. So, I hope you enjoyed this league. I thank you so much for watching. Let's thank once more Chris for upgrading his pledge and becoming a confidant. Thank you again, Chris, and thanks again to all of the Patreon supporters out there. Remember, my friends, we're launching donation leagues for the Patreons next month. I will make a video shortly explaining the details of that, refining the details of that. Some of you may already know the gist, but yeah, stay tuned for that. Stay tuned for more gameplay, more analysis, more of the stuff that you love. And if you are indeed loving the content, remember, the 2 best things you can do to support me are supporting me financially on Patreon. That is so appreciated, and you do get some rewards for doing so, and also subscribing to this channel. We want to grow the channel, and so far so good on that front, but we can always do better, right, my friends? So hit that subscribe button, make sure to like and share and comment. Let me know what you thought about all this stuff, as always. Thanks again for watching, and I will talk to you soon. I hope you have a great night.